The way wisdom works is that if it's good enough, that's its end state. It becomes a platitude. The problem with platitude is that people think that just because it's been repeated a bunch of times, it's no longer true. No, more likely that it's really actually true. That's why it became a platitude. Producer, the content producer. That just sounds so instrumental. Like you're not doing it because you love content. Who the fuck loves content? No one loves content. You may love writing. You may love sharing your enthusiasm about mini PCs or computers. You may love programming. These are all types of content, but no one loves content. If you have a binary definition of success and it basically is hundreds of millions or the 3 Comma Club, there's probably, I don't know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who try. You can get really, really far on 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week. And do you know how I know this? That's how we built Basecamp. You're not just going to have success all the time. It's not going to be summer all the time. Occasionally it's fall and then it's winter, and you better find a way to cope with that. Prepare to weather the storm. One of these days, the storm will come. And if you're not ready, your whole little huffity puff house will fly away.
David, co-founder, CTO at 37signals Basecamp, creator of Ruby on Rails, lots of other things. I think everyone knows you. They're here because of you, not because of me. My first question, no, actually, the first fun fact, I don't know if you remember some years ago, you did a blog post about this Casio watch.
Oh, I love that one.
Yes.
I just got, let me see, do I have it here? No, I don't have it here. I just got a different version of it. They just made like a new version. Okay. I'm not 100% sure it's better, but the bracelet pinches a little less. And it's got a step counter, and you can do lap times on the stopwatch.
Oh, then I might get that, because I saw that blog post 4 or 5 years ago and I bought it because it looks awesome. And it's basically been the one watch I've been wearing every single day.
I love that watch. It is so nice. And a great example that so many hobbies, and that includes computers too, there can be this full range in watches. You can spend $1 million on a watch, or you can spend $25 on a watch. And both of them could be amazing.
Yes. It's a lot of joy. Okay, first question. This was one of my biggest questions, and it resonated with a lot of people. The idea is essentially how to make fuck you money while living your best life. To me, you're a little bit of a contradiction, because you work on whatever you want, it seems like. You love what you do. You have lots of different projects going on. Obviously, 37signals, Basecamp, Hey, Once, Ruby on Rails, you're contributing, you're writing books. You also seem to have tons of hobbies. You're racing cars, and you have, a lot of success, and, you make a lot of money, I assume. And so did you get lucky? Like how is there anything learnable here for people to replicate some version of that? Because I'm still young, I'm still naive. I think I still want to make a lot of money, but I also want to have fun and do lots of, other things. So solve it for us.
Sure. Well, first thing I'd say is I do think to some degree, maybe half of the fuck you money attitude is just the attitude. If you go back to 2004 or 5, I think I gave one of the very first presentations on Ruby on Rails. Before I'd made basically any money at all, I certainly did not have fuck you money. And the slide literally said, fuck you. So you can have this mentality quite early on before you've achieved things. Now, the danger with doing that is that if you have that attitude and you don't have anything to back it up with, that's going to come off as a little crass. And it certainly did at the time. There were plenty of people who, when I put up that slide that literally said, fuck you, thought, who the hell is this guy? Like, what has he accomplished? What has he done? And the fact was I hadn't accomplished necessarily that much, or at least the results of what I had accomplished hadn't come in yet. I created Ruby on Rails, but no one was using it. I'd been using it myself. A few people started using it, but certainly it wasn't the thing it is today, where you literally have hundreds of billions of dollars riding on this thing. And that is just to say, do you know what? I don't think I changed. I don't think that my approach to the world, to interaction, actually, that's not true. I have changed in a number of ways. But the fundamental approach that I think fuck you money tries to encapsulate, this notion that you're just going to pursue The best ideas you know how. You're not going to get discouraged because people call you an idiot or they think whatever you're doing is not noteworthy. You're just going to keep pushing through. You can have that well before you have the money. And I do tend to think that that's actually the order. That you start with the fuck you money attitude and then you end up some of the time with the fuck you money. I don't know a lot of folks where it was sort of the other way around. They were this very mild-mannered person who wasn't too eager to tread on any toes and wasn't too eager to put themselves out there. And then suddenly they got the money and then bam, they revealed themselves as being a completely different person. I do think that in the beginning is when you set your habits, but also even before that, you come pre-programmed to a very large extent by the DNA. I have 3 kids, 3 boys, and it's exceedingly obvious when you literally have your own children, you realize I can influence them, I can nudge them, but probably 80 to 90% of who they are was pre-programmed before they even popped out. There's plenty of science to back this up. And I do think that can set some people free. And I suppose in other ways, it can also be a little bit of a downer. That's not to say that you can't learn things, you can't overcome things, you can't grow and blossom. Of course, you can do all of those things. I was not nearly as comfortable with public speaking or with writing or with a lot of other things 20 years ago because I simply hadn't practiced that much. And you can overcome a lot through practice. But I think to the crux of your question, this notion of fuck you money, probably a fair bit about it is just already set in stone. Now, the other thing is whether you want fuck you money or you just want the money, right? Lots of people would go like, do you know what? I just take the money. The fuck you part is kind of optional. I don't know if there is a recipe. And the reason I say that is if there was, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Someone would just publish it. Oh, you need 3/4 of sugar and you need some flour and you need to just mix it and bake it for 2 hours.
Long wavy hair.
Right. Wavy hair. That's where it is. Lots of people will pretend that there is a formula, but it never replicates. Right? Because if you look at the majority of people who create the kind of home runs we're probably talking about, they're unique to some extent. They're not just following something, right? Like that's the whole point. That's why they're able to attract an audience. That's why their product fits inside of a market. They're not just like everyone else. So try to distill that approach. It's a little bit like, how do you make a hit song? Do you know what? People have tried for a very long time to just figure out an algorithmic way how to do it. And some of the time you actually can. For a brief moment, there's a certain sound, there's a certain look. That was what the whole boy band industry was about, but it didn't last all that long, right? No one listens to whatever Take Back or Take Two or whatever they were called when I was listening to a lot of music going out clubbing, whatever, in the early 2000s. So the formulas just aren't there. And that's, I think, just something you got to wrestle with, the fact that you can take all this input and you can take all these lessons and I can tell you things and other people can tell you things and you can read things, but you got to shake it. And you got to shake it and come out with something that isn't there already, is something the market actually wants and is authentically you. I do also think that's part of the, if there isn't in meta questions, meta equations, it is that whatever approach you end up going with, it's got to ring true for you. That's, you find something that fits with your DNA pre-programming, and then you kind of triangulate and you practice and so on and so forth. But I think if you look at kind of the marketing approaches that's working quite well right now, certainly the ones that's worked for us for many years, I mean, I guess that is a pattern, is the transfer of enthusiasm, right? Like you know something about something and you're really fired up about it because you actually give a shit. You actually care and you radiate that to the world. I've seen that work a lot of times for a lot of people in different ways. I can't tell you how to radiate it. I can't tell you the style of doing it. I can't even tell you what you should be doing. But I have seen the meta pattern of people getting excited about things, being personal, being authentic, and kind of broadcasting it out there. That's a bunch of balls up in the air. And that's the kind of world it is. Like we can't sit here and talk and I'll give you like, here are the 3 ways to make
In
$100 million.
how many parallel universes do you think you'd end up wealthy?
That's a great point. I know this. I've tried a lot of things in my career. None of them have even come close to Basecamp levels of success. Now, probably been petite wealthy in some way, maybe not like buying hypercars wealthy, but petite wealthy, which, by the way, I think is an important point as you set your aspirations and your ambitions. That's 93% of the utility of money, is to just cross the chasm where you no longer have to worry about rent, groceries, going out to eat, all of those things you kind of established yourself. But you know what? That doesn't require that much money. You don't need to join the 3 comma club to no longer worry about rent or groceries or whatever. And I do think that there's a certain amount of just sheer grit that can get you there, where you don't need all the stars to line up. Again, I've been working on SaaS software, for example, for 25 years. One of them was an absolute rocket ship moon hit. That's Basecamp. That is an completely disproportionate part of my wealth, is literally just the profits that we've kept over 20 years from Basecamp that is responsible for a lot of it. And then we made other things over 20 years. We made Campfire, we made High Rise, we made Backpack, we've made Hay, we made Ones, and a lot of those things could have gotten us to sort of the 93%, the petite wealth state. And I'm saying this because like I've been trying for 20 years. I still haven't replicated the home run that was Basecamp, which is to say that there's an alternative universe, absolutely, where the Basecamp thing never happens. I didn't have the right timing. We didn't have the right idea. We didn't have proper execution. And I just do the other stuff, right? I still do very well. All right. Thank you very much. I can buy as many PCs as I want. I can play with Linux as much as I want. I can do 95% of the stuff that I enjoy doing. Maybe I'm not going racing at Le Mans every year, but then I watch it on a nice big screen TV. So that is to say, a lot of people, even if I like to think that I have some skills and I can employ them productively, and most of the times I can push something through to some degree of success, you can do that. You can learn that. Like the odds of that are very good. The odds of you ending up with a Basecamp or anything else in that realm, they're long, because most things just, they don't end up being up there. So set your ambition level accordingly. If you have a binary definition of success and it basically is hundreds of millions or the 3 comma club, I mean, you might as well think like, I want to win the Olympics 100-meter dash. There's probably, I don't know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who try to get there to some extent, and only one person does every year. I never liked those kind of odds. I don't try to hinge my expectations of outcomes on anything like that at all.
If you lost all your money today and you had to again fend for rent, food, livelihood, what do you think you'd start tomorrow? Obviously, all the companies and everything that's throwing off money is gone too. What do you think you'd start tomorrow too?
By far the easiest thing to do, if you have skill and competencies, is to sell them to other people who've already found a good idea. That is, you work as a consultant, you work as an employee. This is the thing that kind of blows
That's
my
not what
mind.
DHH would do tomorrow.
That's what I do. I'd probably be a consultant. I'd go like, all right, we're starting from zero. I know something about programming. I can help you program things. You have good ideas. They've worked for you. Therefore, you have money. You can give some of it to me, and I'll help you make your idea better. I'll help you implement things, and you'll travel faster. That's available to almost anyone who has competencies within programming and in technology. And then you do, or I would do, as we did with Basecamp. I start a side project. So I'm working, I don't know, 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, maybe even 40 hours a week. And then I have time left over. I don't scroll TikTok all day long. So there's 3 hours in the average person's day, right? Like not necessarily TikTok, but YouTube and all the other things that occupy our time. So I have like
6
2 or 3
hours
a
of
day,
Lex
and then I
Friedman.
also have weekends. You can get really, really far on 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week. And do you know how I know this? That's how we built Basecamp. Literally, it was built by me as a sole technical person on the programming side of the equation with 10 to 15 hours a week. I sold that to Jason back in the day for the princely sum of $15 an hour. And I was a student at the time and I had other jobs and obligations, right? That's a side project. And Basecamp itself was a side project for 37 Signals. 37 Signals was a consultancy. They had clients, and then they took some of the time and invested into their own projects. I love the side project idea because it's a way to pursue a lot of dreams, not all of them. Some of them are bigger than a side project, but a lot of dreams can get started at least as a side project with zero risk. You don't have to ask other people for money. You don't have to risk your house or mortgage or whatever. You don't have to go into terrible debt. You can simply invest the spare time that you have and you get super duper really far with that. You now can get way further than I could back then, right? Like computers are so much faster. They're so much cheaper. We have AI. We have a million things where if you have a great idea and you put 10, 15 hours a week into it, you're going to have something to show for it after a few months.
You talked about the transfer of enthusiasm. I feel like that's what everyone feels with you when you talk about Omachi and all the things that you build. Has that always been that way from the beginning, or had you first go through some grind period where you said, I'm just going to focus on this, even though there's these things on the side that I would love to pursue, but I just got to get through this thing to achieve some level of something, and then I can allow myself to dabble in this and that?
No, I don't believe in that type of deferred living. I don't think it actually pans out. I think most people who push off their dreams in that regard and don't even like nibble at them, don't even scratch at them, they forget about those dreams and they get sucked into the 9 to 5, the other things, the grind, whatever you have your else. Right from the get-go, when we started with Basecamp, I did the crazy thing of picking Ruby as a programming language at a time where about 5 people in the West were getting paid to work with Ruby. There was a small fan club in the West, but they were almost all hobbyists who just enjoyed the language so much. And then I thought, like, yeah, let me use that in part because I want to learn things when I build anything new. I like the challenge. I don't give a damn if I have to do almost everything from scratch myself. Usually you don't. But in the case of Ruby, I did actually have to build a lot of things. That's why I ended up with Rails and could release that because I'd built so much stuff. But I never thought, like, do you know what? Ruby sounds great, but I just got to use PHP for 5 years. I've talked to a lot of folks who have that mentality that, like, pursuing their dreams, pursuing their ambitions, that's something they do later. And I got to tell you, it's exceptionally rare I've seen that actually manifest itself to the change they believe they have. Now, it's fine to have dreams, and I'm not talking about everyone. Like when I was doing this stuff, I was in my early 20s, I was single. Life can look very different. You can have a family to support, and that's a lot harder. And yeah, okay, that's life. Most people, most places through history, it was pretty tough. Yet somehow people manage to start new things, learn new things, all the stuff, right? Like a minority, the great majority just went like, oh, well, this is also really hard and I can't do anything and I don't have any time. While again, in the modern world, right? Like you look at their screen on time at the end of the week and like, hey, you just pissed away 10 hours. Well, I needed to decompress. That's just okay. I mean, that's fine. Whatever excuse you need to go through the day, I get it. But also, don't give me this bullshit. It's not possible. I mean, it's a fine line, and you can veer into this kind of success propaganda shit pretty easily. There's a lot of it on TikTok. I actually do watch some TikTok, and there's a lot of it on TikTok. But one of the guys I personally enjoy is David Goggins. I don't know if you know.
Yes, of course.
Yes. All right. So he has this great pick-me-up speech where he's running and he's probably run 40 kilometers that day or something. He looks like someone who's run 40 kilometers. And he goes, it's so easy to be great. No one wants to show up to do even the bare minimum. And I see this whenever we have a job opening. We'll get 1,000 people applying for some positions. We get 2,000 people applying. And they all think why not me? I'll put in my shot. And then they do the bare minimum. Like their cover letter is generic. Their CV is whatever that is. There's just nothing in it that stands out. And then a handful of people just go above. They make something targeted just for us. They speak in a way where we can tell that they paid attention, that this isn't just about any job, it's about this job. And I just go like, wow, out of 1,000 candidates, maybe 5 really put in the effort. And what did it take them? I don't know. Maybe they prepared quite a lot. Maybe it took them an hour. Maybe it took 2 hours. And someone will then say, well, how does that scale? Like, I get rejected all the time. I got to make it up on volume. So I'll send shit out to 10 times as many employers. You think that's how this works? You think that's how anything works? That, like, if you're not getting what you want, like, just do lower quality but more quantity? You're delusional. You should be going the other direction. If you're not having a good time applying to positions, you're probably not putting in enough effort. And if you are putting in enough effort, it's because you're not qualified enough. Like, up your qualifications, do some stuff, learn more, become more competent. That, to me, is sort of the David Goggins approach to it, right? So few people want to do even the bare minimum. I'll give you one quick anecdote of that we're using in my family, and it's the 2%. 2% of people in the world will take the stairs when an escalator or an elevator is available. And I have 3 boys. And one of the things we've been talking about, like, I want to be part of the 2%. So we take the stairs. I live on the 5th floor. We have an elevator and I take the stairs most days, most of the time. Because you know what? It's such a small token of becoming the kind of person who's in the 2%. Because it applies to so many other things too. How can I be the person who puts the shopping cart back when you don't have to, no one's looking? How can I be the person who, by the way, 2 examples here. How did I end up with the career I have? How did I end up being part of 37signals? I sent Jason, I was about to say unsolicited. It wasn't unsolicited. It was a solicited answer. Jason on the blog in 2000 had a PHP programming problem. And he wrote it up like, is there anyone who can help? And I just go, oh, I know the answer to that. So I sent Jason a really nice instruction for him on how to solve his problem and walked him through it. No expectations. No, like, oh, by the way, here's the invoice for my consulting work. Just reaching out, helping someone. And we started talking, and here's that story, right? Me sitting 25 years later, still working with Jason, having made a lot of money and a lot of success with that as a business partner. That started off as a goddamn email, helping a stranger somewhere. Another example. Ruby on Rails is built in large part on a single book called The Patterns of Enterprise Application Architecture by Martin Fowler. I read that book and I thought, like, this is like the holy grail of web development, of systems development. I just love it. I'd love to learn more from Martin. I'd love to sort of somehow have a connection to him. So unsolicited, I redrew all of his kind of low resolution schematics for all the patterns. I redrew them in a program on the Mac called OmniGraffle. It looked really nice. And I just sent them to him. Hey, would you like these? You have a website where all these patterns are listed. It kind of could look better. Here's the gift. I have found, I've also done this, given gift to people, and like nothing came back, right? But if you keep putting good things into the universe, into people, creating connections, eventually odds are that like a little bit of magic is going to happen. You don't do it for that reason. It's not necessarily sort of transactional, or shouldn't be transactional in my opinion, because then it's not genuine, and it's the genuine gifts that actually provokes reciprocity. But this idea that you're going to go above and beyond, you're going to put the fucking shopping cart back, you're going to take the goddamn stairs, you're going to be part of the 2%. You're going to not scroll 3 hours a day. You're going to take the 10 hours a week and you're going to invest them into a side project. All of those things combined, first of all, you're now not in the 2% because you're doing all the things, and these things add up, right? So I guarantee you there are 2%ers who then spend 10 hours a week on TikTok. You're not going to be that person. You just do that handful of things I've been talking about. You're in the 0.1%. That stands out. You can become that person. That's a choice in large extents. And if you don't have the kind of pre-programmed DNA grit to it, like try to build it up. It'll be harder for you, maybe, right? I mean, my wife and this morning, we were just talking about some people seem to be born to be morning people and others not so much. We have 3 boys. One of them is really a morning person. He just gets up in the morning. If that's what it takes for the other 2, it would take a little bit more effort. They'd be a little more grumpy, but they can still do it. You can still do it.
Sounds like good David Goggins. One of the things that you and Jason have in common that stands out is you guys are, I made the mistake when I had Jason on to call him a content creator.
Oh my God, that is the mortal insult. I will slap you across the face. That is just
you guys
such
right.
an ugly term and word. Right. And I'll rant on it just for one hot second.
Okay, get the double rant.
The reason why content creator is such a deplorable term is that A, it takes whatever you're doing and reduces it to a commodity, something that fits in a box that just fills up hours. That's what content is, right? What is content is a bunch of bullshit. It's a great box. And you know who loves great boxes? MBAs who don't give a shit whether they're making cars or guitars or computers. Those are the kind of people who ruin companies. Don't be that kind of person. And then being producer, the content producer, that just sounds so instrumental. Like you're not doing it because you love content. Who the fuck loves content? No one loves content. You may love writing. You may love sharing your enthusiasm about mini PCs or computers. You may love programming. Like these are all types of content, but no one loves content. No one wants to listen to content. Content is sludge, right? We talk about AI slop. Mm-hmm. There's also content sludge that's actually produced by real humans. That is no better at all.
That's what the slop is trained on.
Don't be a content producer, please.
You've been sharing your thoughts for a long time on the internet, blogs, books, tweets, podcasts. What role do you assign to that in your career, your success, how things have turned out?
Oh, it's huge. I don't want to say it's everything because, again, you can't just talk about ideas if you don't also take action on them. Then you're just a yapper. And I mean, there are some good yappers out there, and you can actually make a career out of yapping. That's not the career I wanted. I wanted a career made out of action. And then maybe I could yap about the action after I've taken it. That's a fine strategy. In fact, I'd say it's a superb strategy. It's really nice to be able to talk about the things that you've done in a compelling fashion that people are interested in listening to. I will say that just the form and the function, you can get better at yapping without having anything to yap about. Like, don't like that. Don't get too good at yapping. Mm-hmm. If it then means like your capacity of action, your competency in taking action kind of atrophies. I try to balance both the things. I want to get better at speaking. I want to get better at communicating. I want to get better at persuading and convincing people that the ideas that either I have or in even more cases I've simply discovered, I'm able to relay in a way that is compelling and invites other people to join me in the party, because that's a lot of what I find fun with being on the internet, is to find like-minded people, telling about your discoveries, learning about their discoveries, and together you grow and become better and have more interesting, cool things. But I do think, especially in the world we're in now, where a lot of traditional forms of marketing are not working, even if you have a lot of money, there's a lot of ways you can just utterly waste it. If you have the kind of business that I have, we've tried for many, many years to do various forms of traditional marketing. And whenever we look at the stats for that stuff, it's abysmal. What we've done instead, and how we built the business, is by sharing our thoughts and sharing our technology and sharing our software and sharing our processes and sharing an inside view into how we work and all the rest of it. And if I have to credit where we are today with anything, it has to be that. I mean, at least in terms of what is the active approach we take towards customers, that isn't just build it and hope they'll come. The active approach is sharing the thoughts and the processes and the software and the rest of it. And you know what? Whether it works or doesn't work, I do think it works. Again, as I say, I feel like we have a pretty good control group here. It's like we haven't found anything else that really worked, and we've gotten to where we are today. So it must be almost reductively from that effort. But it's also just a good way personally to learn more. There's all these sayings about the best way to learn anything is to try to teach someone else what you've learned. You realize there are holes in your mental lessons, and you will plug those holes by trying to teach it to other people. I sometimes in software call this documentation-driven development. Whenever I go down to write about a new feature in Rails and like, here's how to use it, and I often learn that what I've built is not good enough because it's too hard to explain. And when I try to explain it, I don't like what it looks like. And then I go back to the drawing board and I make it better. So it's kind of also just a self-improvement loop. You make something, you tell other people about it, you realize that that story could improve, you improve the thing underneath, and now the story gets better, and off you go.
Who are your favorite writers, thinkers, people who put out stuff that you consume regularly?
Consume regularly, good question. I think some of the OGs, let me go back to that first, who've had the biggest influence for me as a programmer are people like Kent Bett. Small Talk Best Practices is one of my top 3 programming books of all time. It's a small little book from, I think, like 97. He wrote it. Absolutely phenomenal. It is such a tactical, not strategical, tactical book on how to write software. Absolutely love it. Martin Fowler, we've already talked about patterns of enterprise application architecture and refactoring. Just absolutely wonderful. Dave Thomas wrote the early Ruby books. I really liked I like that. For more business kind of stuff, Gary Vee is kind of my spirit animal. Like, I don't want to clone, or I don't want to become Gary Vee because no one can become Gary Vee, but I want to soak in just some of his enthusiasm. I mean, we talked about transfers of enthusiasm, right? Like, here I am rocking along at 100 on that scale, and here's Gary Vee like off into the stratosphere at 11,400. He's really an impressive figure in just sheer energy and also insights. I have learned a lot of things and a lot of techniques about how to do things and set a new bar. Like, one of the things I do is I engage with people on X quite a lot. And I really liked actually the changes that have happened to X, where you can reply to someone without it showing up in your feed and messing everything up, because it inhibited me in the past from really engaging. And now the way the algorithm works, it's really easy to give a single individual and like 100 spectators an answer to their specific question without feeling like you're overwhelming everyone else. But Gary Vee just takes this to the next level. I remember him talking about it at one point where he was talking about getting back to 1,000 people a day. I'm like, what? What do you mean 1,000 people? Just this retail politics way of shaking hands with individuals and transferring just like a fraction of you and your enthusiasm in a personal way to someone. It sounds like something that wouldn't scale. How the hell can you? I mean, I can't do 1,000, but some days I could do 100. That for me is a lot, right? I'm an introvert. Gary is certainly not. We are different individuals. He could do it at a different scale. I can do it at, but I can still take that inspiration and run quite far with it. Another OG that I've discovered kind of recently in sort of the same-ish space is Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn was the mentor of Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is a lot of it, perhaps polarizing figure in these regards. And you know what? I'm going to arrest myself. I'm going to give you the side note, like I said, runs in my brain. I was just about to say, I don't love everything Tony Robbins does, but I'm not, that's not going into the transcript. That's just in the side box, because you know what? I fucking hate that caveat because people use it on me all the fucking time. Here's something that David did. I don't usually agree with it. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. What do you mean? Who is it that you agree with 100% of the time about everything? Why are you inserting that, right? Could you just, if you want to call someone out and give someone credit for something, could you just do that in a genuine way that you would say that to them in person? I really like the thing you did, right? Could you imagine walking up to someone in person and saying, man, I love what you did. I usually don't like your shit. I really don't like it. Like, that other thing the other week, but that thing you did was really nice. How do you think that would be received? It'd be received like shit. They wouldn't hear any of your kind of goodwill. They'd just hear like, who the fuck is this asshole? So not going to do that. Tony Robbins, kind of few people know about that. Jim Rohn, to me, is has some of the crystallizations of those Tony Robbins ideas in a way that have really resonated with me. And partly it is that he's echoing in an incredibly compelling way Stoic philosophy, for example, focusing on the things that are within your control and applying your efforts and your thoughts and your attention there, and not worrying so much about all the things that are outside of your control. He has a wonderful clip I've shared a couple of times about learn to expect the night. This is something that I found in my career. I had a lot of success early on in my career. And when you have a lot of early success, there's also a Bill Gates quote about this. You can get deluded into thinking A, that you're never wrong, or B, it'll always be that way. No, it won't. If you live long enough, you'll go through hardship. If you are on the internet long enough, you'll go from being a darling to a villain. And quite often that pendulum will swing real fast between the two. I can tell you because I've been in both positions multiple times over my career. Jim Rohn is a wonderful figure of just developing some resilience about these inevitability. He likes to say, it's just not that kind of planet. Like, it's just not, you're not just going to have success all the time. It's not going to be summer all the time. Occasionally it's fall and then it's winter, and you better find a way to cope with that. Prepare to weather the storm. One of these days, the storm will come. And if you're not ready, your whole little huffity puff house will fly away.
Have you ever read any Nassim Taleb?
Yep. I am also not going to say the thing I did say just before that I was not going to say. In fact, now I can't even refer to it anymore. So like that's the last of it. I really like Anti-Fragile. Like that book to me was kind of a revelation. This idea that adversity improves yourself, which is funny because it's also one of the most ancient, I don't know if it's one of the most ancient, it's one of the most often stated platitude, like what doesn't kill you make you stronger. It's even a song. But do you know what? A lot of wisdom is like that. You hear it in a song, it doesn't really sink in. You hear it as just a saying someone is relaying to you, and it kind of just goes off because it sounds like a platitude. Do you know what? The way wisdom works is that if it's good enough, that's its end state. It becomes a platitude. The problem with platitude is that people think that just because it's been repeated a bunch of times, it's no longer true. No, more likely that it's really actually true. That's why it became a platitude. Anti-Fragile was the book that made, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, sink in.
Right.
Which is really an interesting meta observation. I've learned a lot of things over my career, sometimes platitudes, sometimes more complicated things. And I wasn't ready to learn it. I wasn't ready to internalize it. Like it kind of just like bounced off, ricocheted off my skull. Maybe they left a little mark, but it didn't sink in, right? And then I needed an experience, or I needed some time, or I needed some perspective. And suddenly there was room for that piece of wisdom at that time to have its effect.
Yeah.
Now, this is something we hear all the time. I will tell you, the most common goodwill we get back on rework, or it doesn't have to be crazy at work, or any of the other stuff that we've written, is when people write, do you know what, that I already thought that. Like that chapter in rework, yeah, I also don't like meetings, to take just one example. I thought I was the only one. Like that recognition that you have an insight that's then getting validated by other people in other formats is really powerful. It's one of the reasons I got so into Stoicism, because I felt like I had Stoicism like 0.25 Alpha Edition, just self-developed in my head. And then I realized, oh shit, 2,500 years ago, there were a handful of some of the wisest people who have ever lived who wrote this down in a codified version and released like 1.0 and 2.0. Wow, I can see where negative visualization comes from. Oh, here's some tweaks to the beta version I've been running. I can upgrade my operating system, and now I have a better version of it. But it's also, I like it because I already knew a little of it, right?
Yeah.
I do think that oftentimes that attraction to wisdom and insight comes from having a taste of it already, a little bit of it in your own hands.
Yeah. The other thing that Taleb said, I don't know if it's correct, it's like the best way to not have a reputation is by caring too much about it, or by caring about it. And I felt like that's like a theme both with you, with Gary Vee, with like that comment about people like, I don't like everything they say. The reason why people say that is because they want to hedge and not be associated with everything that person says.
Yes.
And I mean, I watched your opening keynote at Rails World, and I think you ended on "fuck Apple." So,
I do think actually it is key, and it's not even what it is humans are exceptional at smelling inauthenticity. They're exceptional at kind of whipping out that someone's just not genuine. And it's really difficult to be genuine. If you're genuine, you will almost by definition be vulnerable. Like you're putting your real self out there. Kafka had this wonderful quote about showing up to the ball of life and not realizing that he was the only one not wearing a mask. I mean, I'm butchering the quote here, but that's the essence of it. And there's some of that where like there's some vulnerability of showing up without the mask. You may get insulted and then it's the real you, right? A lot of people find it much easier to put on the mask, and then if people don't like it or whatever, they can just take the mask off. They can try another mask. There's some defense there. When you put yourself out as a genuine person who talks about what they really believe, it can hit a little harder. You have to develop a bit of a thicker skin or be born with it, as we talked about. I think some of it is being born with it, but you can also develop it. I was certainly far more thin-skinned when I started in this industry and I was about to say discussing. I think arguing is a better word. Arguing with strangers on the internet, like that'll teach you or grow thick skin on you quite quickly.
Yeah. To get a little selfish here, well, I've been mostly asking the questions that I wanted to ask, which I think also tied into many of the questions that people sent me. Have you ever heard of the concept network states?
No.
Balaji wrote this book called Network States, and the idea is essentially that the reason why there are so many great products and services in the world is competition. If you don't like the things that exist in the world, you can try to do it better, whether it's a coffee shop or development framework or whatever it is. That does not apply to countries right now. There's a set amount of countries, and you're born into one. That comes with certain sets of regulations and laws and culture and social holidays and all those things, and you can move around them, not easily, but you can try to immigrate to the US, etc. But you can't just say, you know what, I like some of the things that Denmark does, I like some of the things that the US does, I like some of the things that Singapore does, but I think I can do it better, and I'm going to start my own country, and we'll see if it's successful. And if it's successful, people move there and we'll have a competing product. And network states, if it's like the idea to bootstrap them, that's a long lead up. If you or 37 Signals were to start their own country, what do you think would be some of the features, elements, things that you would take from things that you've seen in the world?
I'm going to start with the non-controversial answer, and then I'll get to the controversial answer later. The non-controversial answer, well, I think it's non-controversial, is the premise is bust. We don't have, as individual humans, even small groups of humans, maybe even relatively large groups of humans, the wisdom to create successful countries. That's not how successful countries are created. And we know this because in the 20th century, quite a lot of attempts were made to dramatically remake a country in a fairer image, in a more equitable image, with all sorts of other high-minded visionary goals. And do you know what? Every single one of them eventually turned out to be a murderous regime.
But that's top down, and you do it bottoms up.
Well, no, I don't actually think it is. I mean, the advent of communism, for example, to take that. I mean, This whole thing about the upswell, right? Like of the proletariat revolting against the elites at the top. Now, of course, the irony is that it takes about 5 seconds for that proletariat to become top down, because that's what it all becomes. And that's what this would become too. I think it's completely delusional to think you can look at the 20th century and go like, yeah, do you know what? We can reboot successful countries in like decades. That's not how this works. That's not how any of the stuff of nation building works. And the key reason it does not work this way, and maybe this is the more controversial part, is that countries are not about ideas in the concrete sense of it. They are about people and cultures that have been honed like rocks over generations, over hundreds of years in many cases. There are a few outliers. America's one of them that been able to do amazing things in 250 years. And that's basically it. Like, that's the one success story we have. The vast majority of everything else is like, oh yeah, Denmark. Denmark's a really nice place. I like a lot of things about Denmark. Denmark is the place it is because of the fucking Danes who live here, who have 1,200 years of shared history and culture. And we don't even know which parts are load bearing and which parts are not. This is one of the reasons I love the concept of Chesterton's fence. Like you have all these traditions and prohibitions that to a casual observer, particularly an intellectual, look silly. Why do we have this? This is unnecessary. This is uncivilized in some cases, or it's just ancient. Let's just rip it out. You don't learn until you rip it out that like that was what kept the wolves at bay. I mean, you don't see the wolves. It just looked like a nice prairie. You pull out the fence and bam, there be them wolves. And I think Europe, in many ways, is a current example of what happens when you try to reshape that. The European Union have tried to reshape the individual membership countries for quite a long time, at least 40, 50 years. What do they have to show for that? Is that been successful? No, it's not. It's been an absolute terrible failure on the majority of metrics anyone would care to measure. I think the reality just is that nation building is the work of generations, of literally centuries. And you are dangerously delusional if you think you can attempt that with just a handful of good ideas and smart people. That has a really poor track record. I would not want to mess with it. I would not want to try my hand at it. I do not think the wisdom to do it well exists within the grasp of groups of people in a single generation.
Let me reframe the question, because I agree but also disagree with you. Obviously, you can't recreate a Microsoft looking at Microsoft today and be like, let me just write down some rules and now we have.
No, actually, sorry. Let me stop you for a half second. Because I think that is exactly the lens Balaji and others look at. They look at companies and like, I built a company. I built culture. I was able to shape whatever company I worked at in my image, and I was successful doing so, and we beat others in the market. Therefore, I think I'm smart enough to do this. That's the classical kind of, you're out of your depth, bro, right? And I say that as someone who loves ambition. And I say that as someone who loves what Elon is doing, trying to establish a new colony on Mars. That's probably the safe distance. I'd take your question at face value if we're talking about Mars.
Well, or your house. If you're just trying to attract, neighbors, like you can set the rules. The baseline rules are the Danish rules, and you can just make some tweaks to it.
Yeah, it's not the rules. This is what I've learned. And it actually took me quite a long time to learn this, because we have this misconception that that's what countries are, or that's what culture is. It's like a set of rules, and we can write them down and then other people can learn them. That's not how this works. That is literally not how this works. This is what the European experiment over the last 40 years, and this is where we get into some of the spiciest stuff around mass immigration. It does not work. You cannot write down culture and then convey it. You have to literally be not born with it necessarily, but born in it. My wife is American. She's of Scandinavian descent. Scandinavian culture to her as an American who has a couple of generations in the US is foreign in a bunch of ways that are not fixable in her lifetime. The Danes don't have the society they have because they were really good at writing things down. They don't have better laws than anyone else. They have, now it really gets spicy, they have better people. And I mean that in the sense of the outcomes that the Danes are able to get versus other things. You can want different outcomes. I'm totally game with that. But if you look at Denmark in particular, and the reason I'm using that example is I am Dane. I'm currently in Denmark, so I feel like I have standing to speak about it in those ways. The Danes have the society they have because it's full of Danes, and because they were born into that culture, and that culture was honed over hundreds of years. Transplanting other people in, regardless of where they come from, even America, is exceptionally difficult. And when you try to do it at scale, we basically only have a wake of failures in doing so. And you know what? That squares really poorly with the kind of people we're talking about, whether it's Balaji or Peter Thiel or or Elon Musk or any of the most visionary, competent company builders and operators. Like, of course they would think that they could do this, right? And I admire that. Like, that's actually part of what I admire about the American spirit, right? Like this just evident delusion of grandeur that occasionally works out, certainly within company building and certainly within innovation, where a million people will tell them, you're never going to get cars running on laptop batteries. And Elon just go like, well, you know what? I'm going to try. You're never going to be able to catch a rocket returning from space and reuse it. What are you talking about? Well, I'm going to try. And then they succeed at it. And I think that's wonderful. But I also think nation building is not one of those domains. And I think actually to stay in the semi-spicy realm, Elon just did try his hand with that, didn't he? With American politics. Did he learn that maybe it wasn't as easy as he thought it was? Yeah, I think he did. And nation building is about that times 10,000 in terms of how hard it is.
Well, I think this could be a longer topic, but this also ties into another topic that I had, which was this EU versus US debate, quality of life, where should you build a startup, access to capital, Americans say Europe is falling behind and, we'll end in the Stone Ages and whatever.
Reality is telling Europe that they're falling behind. And not just, no, that's even too optimistic. Reality is telling us we are in Europe desperately, catastrophically, pathetically behind when it comes to entrepreneurship, starting new companies, growing companies, being self-sufficient in technology, in energy, in defense, Europe's got a lot of challenges. And I say that as a European who loves many, many things about Europe, not least of all its culture and its people and its food. And why can't I get a decent croissant in the US? There's a million things to like about Europe. I don't like its entrepreneurial spirit. I don't like its narrow-mindedness. I don't like how low the ceiling is. I love all of those things about America. And I do think the Europeans simply have to sit down and start taking notes, because the smug superiority you'll find often in Brussels about what Europe is supposed to do or not do to become competitive has been an absolute abject failure over the last 40 years. As you can tell, I'm not the biggest fan of the EU as an institution. And I'm saying that on the basis of its accomplishments, which are poor. And I'm saying that on the basis of its outlook, which is poor. Those are not controversial statements, nothing like what we just talked about. You have Draghi and his report coming out and saying, yep, basically Europe is fucked if it keeps doing what it's been doing. And what does Brussels say? Oh, yeah, very important Draghi report. Let's just go back to business and pass a bunch of bullshit laws about AI, for example, even though we have no industry and no business to legislate anything there because we don't understand anything. We don't have anything. Meanwhile, the people who actually make things happen in those spaces are either in the US or in China. I do think Europe is in trouble. And the trap is that from certain countries and vantage points, it's difficult to spot the trouble. Because I'm here in Copenhagen. It's an absolutely wonderful city. The best, in my opinion, when it comes to food, when it comes to safety, when it comes to city design, when it comes to kids being able to explore it on their own. You're like, I don't want to trade that for fucking Baltimore or probably even LA or San Francisco. But how long can this last? And this is the favorite insult from the Americans, right? That Europe has turned into a museum. And there's something that kind of stings in that accusation because we know it's a little bit true. We know that when we talk about the glory of Europe, we're looking backwards.
Sure.
When the Americans talk about the glory of the US, to a large degree, they're looking forwards.
Mm-hmm. So you ended up in Copenhagen. I mean, you could obviously live anywhere you wanted because of the quality of life.
As a parent, yes. And this is also one of those things that tipped against Europe to some extent. As a 20-something-year-old who had big dreams and big ideas and wanted to be around other people with big ideas and big dreams and be in a society that celebrates big ideas and big dreams, the US is really tempting if you can make a go at it. And I'm not selling you something here. I'm just telling you reality. The Danes go to America in droves when they are the kind of individuals who like big ideas and have big dreams. Mm-hmm. And they do so because they've seen time and again that those big dreams and those big ideas, they're rewarded and celebrated over there. They're not quite as rewarded or quite as celebrated back here. That's not a terminal definition. Could I have done many of the things that I've done from Copenhagen? Yeah, I think I could. Would I have wanted to? That's a more difficult question. Now, I want to be in Copenhagen now because as a father of 3 kids, is an exceptional place to be. And I am able to do many of the things and be involved with many of the things that I have started and run from Copenhagen. But if I was going to sell myself on it as a 20-something-year-old, man.
Easy question for the last 2 minutes. How do you change that?
Some of it I hope to change by injecting or repatriating the blood that went over there to get it back into Europe when those individuals who went to pursue their big dreams in their 20s end up with a family and they don't want to step over literal human fecal matter on the streets of San Francisco. And they would like to have a place where their entire family feels safe and feel supported and all the other things. I do think it's very appealing. Many European cities have a lot to offer when it comes to that stage of life. And that is the kind of individuals who might be able to influence that culture we're talking about. But I also have quite a lot of humility when it comes to it. How much or how long does it take to reset a culture? I unfortunately think we're talking about decades at the best of times and probably more realistic generations. But that's, hey, I'm an ambition person. And I think as we just talked about the big dreams and the big ambitions, like, could you not apply those to the next generation of Europe? Of course you could. Of course you could. And I actually do think that there are a lot of Europeans who go to America with the big dreams, but still have their heart on their home soil. I still have a heart for Denmark. I have not invested in any American startups. I've invested in quite a few Danish startups, exactly because I have that affiliation, as most humans do, to a certain plot of land where they grew up, right? We can tap into that more. We can make it easier for those entrepreneurs to return, to deploy their capital, and to celebrate their successes. This is one of the things that a lot of European countries, including Denmark, does have a little bit of a hard time with, right? They don't want to be too celebratory about people who went out and made it big because, like, well, what does that say about the rest of us? And in Denmark, we have something called janteloven, like tall poppy syndrome, I think it's called in the UK. There are a lot of cultural mores about that, but hey, do you know what? We can change them. I often think about the core companies in Copenhagen, or not even Copenhagen, in Denmark, that power the whole social welfare state. They are 100 years old. Denmark looked very different 100 years ago. There was way more of an entrepreneurial spirit. And then we, over the decades, fell into another mode that can revert. You look at the UK, and again, as soon as you start talking about concrete politics, things can get like almost like blindsided. Like the UK prior to after Thatcher, they were very different places. The US prior to after Reagan were very different places. Now, I understand as soon as you say any specific names that are associated with the specific ideologies, people just go like boop, and the brain turns off and the team jersey comes on. But just as to reflect on the fact that like things do actually change, they can change, and they have changed in the past. So we should have the hope at the very least that it can also change now.
All right, David, I want to be respectful of your time. There's a million more questions. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know, guys, we didn't get to anything really in the chat. I did try to incorporate the themes that I've seen.
This is a an affliction you get into in your old age when you've gotten used to yapping. You get so good at it that you can make it through an hour on 3 questions. And sometimes that's interesting. And other times you're like, oh, I wish we could just keep those answers a little more.
Next time, 6 hours.
Yes.
Yeah, all right, we'll just David. Have to book him again, Finn.
Yeah. Well, David is a busy man. I would talk to him more. David, thank you so much.